for 48 hours. And I just simply wrote the story, and I was a little bit surprised. Is that a good idea, and will that continue? And I have a second question.
Okay. I'm not sure exactly which piece that you're talking about. Part of that is the job of the state treasurer, is to be doing money that's just floating money. So it's short-term investments. You make a little bit on the margins, but it's not much in the way of long-term investments. But that's money that's being used for the state's general fund and things like that. That's different than some of the longer-term investments I was talking about.
Right, you got short-term money.
Yes, exactly.
That's pretty common?
That's very common, yes.
Okay, second question. The Arizona, they had a meeting in Cottonwood last week with Rob Adams chaired the meeting, or co-chaired it. They acted on the recommendations of the Arizona Town Hall. They recommended that they cut the state tax rate and broaden the base. Cut the rate, broaden the base. Is that a good idea? Number two, they also recommended that they repeal the Arizona, this is a lot of Republicans once again, and Democrats coming together, that they repeal the 1992 law that requires 2/3 vote to have any tax or any revenue increases in Arizona. Repeal the 1992 law, 2/3 vote, lowers the state tax rate, yet broaden the base. I don't know what broaden the base means, if you could explain that.
Sure. You know, what they mean by broaden the base is basically tax reform, which is something I support us looking at and really being able to have a group of people come together and say, here's how we need to remake the tax code and update it for a new century. There's a lot of things that you do pay sales taxes on, and a lot of things left out of that you're not paying sales taxes on. Partly because when we put in place the present tax system, we were an economy driven by manufacturing and things like that, and less by services. And so a lot of these services have been left out of the sales tax base, and so aren't being counted. And so that idea, which I think is something that, as you said, is getting a lot of support among both Democrats and Republicans, is to say, let's look at the overall economy and then broaden the base. One, to make sure that we're having more fairness in a lot of these different parts of the economy, but also to have a more stable tax code, so that we're not so reliant on the industries that are in there now with other people, whether it's lawyers and lobbyists and people like that who you don't pay sales taxes on, people like that left out.
What about the property taxes? Do you foresee, I mean, it looks like all of the properties are going down in value right now, so what are they going to do? Are they going to just up the mill rate or something?
That's what they did.
What do you foresee?
Yeah, different communities are obviously having different answers there. Right now what they're pushing on is, of course, a sales tax increase. And that's where, they're putting their eggs, and that's where they're putting their big support. I think, at a time like this, that's the wrong answer, because what they're doing is really increasing the sales tax at the same time that they want to have a gigantic tax cut for a relatively small number of corporations in the state. If they wanted to be fiscally responsible and said we're going to be able to do the things we have to do to balance our state budget and to get us out of this hole, that's one thing. But to kind of rob Peter to pay Paul isn't really fiscally responsible. So that's really where the energy is at this point. Let me go to the back.
Yeah. If in the next election the state Senate and the House remain pretty much in the same control as it is at the moment, what difference can you make with the House?
Yes, it's a good question. If the legislature stays in the control of the same kind of folks who have been in charge now, what difference can it make? There's a few different things. First of all, a lot of the things I was talking about, these state investments, these billions of dollars of state investments, are things the treasurer decides. Legislature doesn't decide that, governor doesn't decide that. That's money that the state treasurer decides in terms of the state treasurer's constitutional powers. Those audits, again, those are things that the treasurer undertakes, not something the legislature, the governor, or whoever else is in there undertakes. So there's some certain powers that the treasurer has just within that office. But the broader question about influencing the other kinds of policies coming out of the state is still a valid one. And I guess I get back to my point that I was making before about when I was talking about Parker, Arizona, and that Arizona We Want poll. is that there really is a bipartisan consensus out there that isn't reflected in the state legislature because so many of these districts around the state are decided in their primaries, and it's the extreme of the extreme that comes out to vote. But that doesn't mean that the people who are elected don't still have a responsibility and a need from their own standpoint to actually be representing their community. And so if we took the people from Parker, Arizona, we brought them out to the state legislature and had them lobby their representatives. Or we went up to the mayors and people I've talked to up in Mojave County and brought them down to the legislature and said, look, here's what we as the people of your Senate district or legislative district, we as the people who are the leaders of the communities you represent, here's what we need. That is, I think, the way you're going to start forcing some of these changes to go through. Let me go this way to start over here.
Tell us how you became a fourth-generation Arizonan.
I actually never did become a fourth-generation Arizonan. My wife is a fourth-generation Arizonan, and her great-grandparents were in Tucson, and you know, staying with her grandparents and parents, and then she was, of course, born and raised in Tucson as well. And so I am lucky enough to be the father of a fifth-generation Arizonan, which you don't see a lot of these days. Yes.
I feel like a very frustrated Democrat these days. You know, I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking to myself, well, Janet Napolitano was our governor, and so why didn't she take this initiative to make our state a solar? I mean, is that, and also, the second question is, do you have any say-so as far as economic stimulus goes, the stimulus package?
Stimulus package, federal. Two good questions. You know, I think Janet Napolitano, you know, inherited a mess when she came in 2002, and I think as we look back on what she did, I think she started to make some of these changes. You know, she put in place some of the building blocks. Science Foundation Arizona, a big deal that she was able to bring together really with national and international support. TGen, which is one of the great leaders in the country on biotechnology and healthcare innovations in that area. A lot of these other things that you can point to in education and other places. And she, again, with a legislature that wasn't always agreeing with her, or you know, hardly ever agreed with her, but she was able to push these things through and get us to a point where I think we really were at the starting blocks of being able to be in this race for the future with places like the Research Triangle in North Carolina, or Utah, or Texas in a lot of ways, or you name it, all these other states that are doing these right kind of things. We've slid back a lot. You know, take Science Foundation Arizona. They basically had to go to court to have the state of Arizona live up to the contracts that it had made because the state legislature refused to pay the money that the state had agreed to, even though they had a signed contract basically calling on them and demanding that they do so. So we've had to have these kinds of fights. We're in a point right now where we are going to either keep on going this direction or get back on this track, or we're going to be competing with Alabama and Mississippi and a lot of these other states for the lowest wage is jobs. That is really the point where we're in the future. And so all this work that's gone in over the past decade has been to say, let's make Arizona have a place in this race for the future. And right now, in 2010, I really believe is going to be an election that's going to decide which direction we're going to go on that.
This is kind of the same thing, frustration sort of thing as a liberal Democrat. It's so discouraging to see what's happening, you know, in our national Congress and as well in the state, where people who are good folk are deciding not to run because the atmosphere is just so partisan that it's impossible for them to stay in there and feel like they can accomplish anything.
Right.
And I guess I'm really concerned about Arizona in that regard. My daughter was with some other social worker folks down at the state capitol on Wednesday and came home and I don't know what it is they were trying to get folks to look at, but she came home and in the conversation I had, she was just livid